as I mentioned in part 1, I'll be taking a look at the toys of Hot Rod, Blur and Cup. First up we have Hot Rod. And personally, for me, Hot Rod is actually the weakest of the three. But as you'll see as the video progresses, it being the weakest really does allude to how good these sets of toys and the representations of these three characters are. Even though I say it's the weakest, it still has some excellent features and it's a pretty good representation of Hot Rod. But there is a few niggly things that I would say that I'm not exactly unhappy about, but they're just the things that I expect to see from Hot Rod, and this alt mode doesn't actually convey it. So the alt mode of Hot Rod is the Cybertronian muscle car. And as I said, there's a lot of good things about the toy. The silver absolutely shines across the exhaust and the wheels, and the colours are absolutely spot on for Hot Rod. I also really like the translucent plastic featured on the canopy and the flame detail, and they've also done a fantastic job of hiding the robot feet to give it that kind of, you know, sports car, supercar look. Technically kind of not what you get in the '86 movie, but it's a good way of hiding the robot parts for sure in an alt mode. Other than that, there is no visible robot parts at all. They are all nicely hidden underneath. But where this toy falls down in terms of Hot Rod for me is the engine block. It's just too small. If I think about the image of Daniel on his hoverboard racing along to Lookout Mountain, and Hot Rod comes along, scoops him up, transforms, and you get that shot. That engine block is huge, and it's, you know, a signature of a muscle car. And the other thing that I'm not so fond of is he's in some ways a little bit too curvy for me. The one thing I like about Hot Rod when I first saw him was he reminded me of kind of 1970s Japanese concept cars, you know, like the Dome Zero. He had that really sleek, you know, somewhat angular look to him, and it somewhat doesn't convey that. I kind of need more harsher, sharper lines for Hot Rod. But the joy of this, as I said, there's still some great points to be had with this alt mode, is that the canopy does lift up, and the fact that the Takara LG and Titan's Return made the Autobot Trifecta of Hot Rod, Blur and Cup Titan Masters, you know, alluding back to the original Headmaster gimmick, allows you to have a pilot inside your vehicle. It just harkens back to toys of the 80s. If you think about Diaclone and Diacron, you know, there was always spaces for a pilot to go in, and I think that's a stunning feature for this alt mode, and for all of the alt modes with the Autobot Trifecta. So that has been the alt mode for Rodimus. But where this toy and this representation of Hot Rod falls down is with the robot mode. Robot mode and Titan Master for Hot Rod, focusing in on the Titan Master and Hot Rod's head. Considering how small the heads are, there's still a decent amount of detail for them, with paint apps on the face and the eyes, and you do get a little bit of articulation on each hand, and then it's a simple transformation just to get it into head mode, and then you see the face sculpt of Hot Rod. It's pretty close to Hot Rod from the movie and the TV show. Not the best, but I can live with that one. And the bot himself. As I said with the alt mode, the colours are absolutely spot on, but it's the proportions. And it's a real shame because for a long time Hot Rod was my favourite growing up, and I know that he's a fan favourite, but for this particular iteration of Hot Rod, it's just kind of all over the place for me. I think the shoulders are far too high. His spoiler is not high enough. I'd like to see his spoiler much higher. And then there's a few little bits of styling and detail that Hasbro have done that slightly grate on me. The fact that his hands are quite covered, which I know is a sacrifice to get that smooth alt mode. And a few other bits and pieces is they put all this molded detail inside the leg, and I'm unsure of why. They could have just kept it hollow and covered it over. You know, it doesn't really do anything for transformation. It's not exactly keeping the weight down, having extra plastic inside a hollowed out space that you've done. Yeah, a little bit unsure on that one. And then the final, in some ways the nail in the coffin that makes this the weakest, is the kind of the gaps in between. There's just a huge amount of space in between his chest and his back. But the articulation's fantastic on the Takara LGs, and the same goes with the Titan's Return. You can get just incredible poses. Reenact some imagery from the movie. But yeah, sadly for me, he's the weakest part of the Autobot Trifecta, and it's a real shame because, as I said, he's a beloved character and one of my favourites for years and years. So, I had forgotten to mention that when Takara LG released Hot Rod, they made him a Target Master once again. I really enjoyed the rebirth as a kid, and it was fun to see all the characters become Headmasters and Target Masters. Subsequently, I've experienced the Japanese continuity of the Headmasters, Super God, Master Force and Victory, and that has now kind of superseded what I like about G1. I'm not overly fussed about having Target Masters, as I now just see these three characters as just the basic characters and not Target Masters, but it is one hell of an awesome accessory to have for anybody who loves Hot Rod. It beautifully homages the original Firebolt in that styling and colour, but with added translucent plastic. And when in robot mode, even better as a little partner for Hot Rod. There's so much detail and articulation for such, again, tiny figures. I just think they're absolutely fantastic. Got paint apps on the face once again, on the eyes and the faceplate, and it does a very good job of hiding the peg. It's an absolutely great addition, and it fits on both modes perfectly. Either in robot mode alt mode, giving it that OG G1 flavour. Next up, Blur. Blur's alt mode, the hover car, the futuristic, incredibly fast hover car. For me, this alt mode, nigh on perfect for screen accuracy. I think that's the closest thing to a Blur toy from the main line I have ever seen. The colours are ridiculously spot on, and it is just, when you see it, you see Blur straight away. From the detail of that bit to the, the cockpit, the angled lines, the accents of colour. It's just, it looks like it jumped off the screen. And with the TV show, you got to see a lot of Blur's alt mode, and a nice little bit in the movie when they're on the planet of Junk, on Junkion, you get to see Blur go, and just, it's, as I said, it's nigh on perfect. The only thing that is, again, a little bit niggly with these toys is you get to see a little bit of robot on the side profile, but it does have wheels on the bottom, so when you do go along the floor, it still gives that illusion of hovering. But yeah, I cannot complain at all about this alt mode. Little red faction symbol. Sadly, the Takara LG release of Blur, obviously done in its screen accurate colours, wasn't a Titan Master. No, it is a Titan Master. It wasn't a Target Master. Instead, it came with a gun, which you can also attach underneath to give him an extra little bit of armoured firepower. I think it's a great place to store the weapon. But if you're a sucker for screen accuracy every once in a while like me, I don't desperately need it, and I'll gladly have him posed with a gun in robot mode. Just like Hot Rod, the Titan Master can pilot inside, and then you get a bit more of his cockpit. Again, a nice use of translucent plastic. It's a great addition to these figures. I'm pleased to see that they used translucent plastic, and then the Titan Master just fits in perfectly. The nice thing about Blur, he also has pegs which allow you to peg on the Titan Master either side for an added bit of play value. I think it's a stunning, absolutely stunning representation of Blur, and I think they've just absolutely nailed it with his alt mode. Blur's robot mode and Titan Master. Again, starting with his head, it's a pretty spot on face sculpt. I would have liked to have perhaps had a smile, but you can't have everything, but the proportion of the head is perfect. That domed head that he has, fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And then it's just the same as with every Titan Master. You just pop the head in, and there you have Blur, the fast talking, fast moving Autobot warrior. Pretty spot on, I think, in terms of robot mode. As I mentioned before, as always, the colours for Blur, incredible. The colours for all of these, they've really nailed them for me. and there's just little accents, little spiky pointy bits that Blur is known for that really make this iteration of Blur come alive for me. Again, you've just got that same amount of posability, wrist swivels, arm swivels. His proportions are so much better than Hot Rod's, and I just think he really pops on the shelf. Niggles though, always with the niggles. That's a bit of kibble. That's a bit of kibble right there, and there's a little bits of kibble on there. They hid the fin nicely, but the arms are somewhat out for me. But you know, you're never gonna get the perfect bot. There's always gonna be something that, you know, that slightly bugs you. You know, if you are finding perfect bots, then congratulations to you. But you know, I'm pedantic about things and peculiar when it comes to bots. But he's barely hollow at all. There is the front of Blur, which you can actually use as a shield, which is a nice little touch. Not necessarily for me, as I like to have my robots a little bit more screen accurate at times and not so encumbered by the accessories. But again, it's just an excellent use of keeping all your parts of your bots together. I think it's an absolutely great representation of Blur. No Target Master though. Cup then. My favourite of the three, and the one that I think is the best out of the Autobot Trifecta, from character to design to toy, playability and overall awesomeness. Yes, he doesn't have the best iteration of an alt mode compared to Blur, as with the others, Niggles, we've definitely got visible robot syndrome going on. But once again, colours absolutely pop, and the use of translucent plastic for the canopy, again, so you can have the Titan Master riding inside. It's such an enjoyable play aspect to Titan's Return and the Takara LG versions of these characters. I've always thought the Cybertronian Picker was a really cool alt mode, and it really suited the character of Cup. It's a fun toy and a great alt mode, but it does lack in areas. It's a bit thin and flimsy on the sides, but overall it's pretty decent. And you do have ports on the back to add a Target Master, once again, just like Hot Rod, to give it that original OG flavour. Sadly not able to pop it on the top like you used to with the original G1 toy, but I still think it's a great version and a fun alt mode. Sometimes you want a toy to be fun. As much as I've spoken about screen accuracy and those bits and pieces, sometimes it's nice just to have a fun toy. But where it really does come alive and stands out compared to the other two is the robot mode. And that is Cup through and through. This is one of the best mainline toys I've ever owned in recent years. That is Cup. to a T. The flinty old warrior. And they've made such perfect choices when it comes to styling. They've given him the curvaceous shoulders, which we know from the cartoon, and he's big and chunky, and he just, everything tabs in beautifully, and there's no gaps anywhere, there's no kibble. They've made clever engineering the backs of his legs, and it just stands tall on the shelf next to the other two. He's a great iteration of Cup. You know, his alt mode doesn't exactly hit the mark. It's all about the robot mode, from the detailing inside his canopy to the face sculpt to the little accents of yellow. It's in some ways a beautiful symbiosis of everything about Cup, whether it be on the screen or the comics or, you know, the character's personality. You know, he's weary and full of experience, and I get that from this version of him. In some ways I kind of wish that the alt mode was better, but as I said before, when looking back at the previous two, you can't get everything, but when they all stand together on the shelf, they just absolutely pop. Hot Rod, Blur and Cup, to whom I affectionately refer to as the Autobot Trifecta. I've been Rudy Sasu, and always remember, it's as much about play as it is display. Thanks for watching.